It's time to chill out and get ready for a mediocre Q&A live stream. If you're old enough, grab yourself your favorite adult beverage, and if you're not, stick with apple juice. Put your feet up and relax. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. And now let's cue up the intro music. Welcome to the HVACR videos live stream. Hopefully you guys are all doing well. I am doing pretty good here. I'm still a little hoarse, kind of. I'm not sick anymore, but it's funny. I was sick like 2 weeks ago and everything was good, but then all of a sudden it's just hitting me where I'm starting to lose my voice. Whatever. Got some hot tea and I'm good to go. You know, it's funny because the older that I get, the more like everything bothers me. And like, I can't sleep with my ceiling fan on in my room in the wintertime because it kills my throat. Apparently I'm a mouth breather. So laying like that and it just dries my throat out every morning, whatever. Getting old kind of sucks sometimes. You know what I mean? You know what I mean, Vern? You know, it's funny. I always put like those little quotes and different movie things and, you know, the little bits of my personality in my live streams and my videos and stuff. And I do appreciate when people get it and they get the references and stuff. It's kind of funny because someone will be like, wait, was that an Ernest reference? And it's like, yeah, it was, you know, like I always just put these little random things that I remember from my childhood. So, but yeah, welcome to the HVACR videos live stream. My name is Chris. If this is the first time tuning in, I'm just a normal HVACR service technician. I happen to film myself. I'm a little peculiar in the way that I work and, you know, I just post it up on YouTube to let people learn something from it, whether it be good or bad. You know, you learn what not to do, you learn what to do. You know, I just put it out there and try to be myself as much as possible. I do have to say thanks to my buddy Jason Johnson. He sent me a sticker I just got in the mail today, so that's pretty cool. I'll definitely be sending you some of my stickers, Jason. Get those going on. But yeah, that's pretty cool. Pretty sweet sticker you got going on there, bud. Anybody out there has stickers or anything they want to send me, shoot me an email. I'll work something out. I'll get you guys a sticker or something like that. So you can always send, if you want to send anything to me, my PO box is in the show notes of every video. It's right there. You can just send it to that address. I go by there once a week, check it and everything. So it's all good, but hello to everybody. Got a couple things I want to cover before we get to this. If you guys have any questions or comments or things that you want me to talk about, do me a favor, put them in the chat, but put them in caps lock. Okay. I will say if you're watching this on other social media platforms, that's fine. We are the most active on YouTube, and there's a chat of 92 something people right now on YouTube, and there's a pretty good amount of people in the chat commenting. So but again, it doesn't benefit me either way what platform you watch it on. I'm just saying if you watch it on YouTube, you'll get to interact with a group of people. I did happen to see some comments from the last live stream where someone said that like their comments weren't coming up or something like that. Sometimes there's so many comments going by that I just don't see them, and that does happen. So just keep putting your questions or your comments in caps lock until myself or one of the moderators tells you to stop. If I miss your question or comment, shoot me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com and I'll try to get to it. So let's see what else we got going on in the chat real quick. Okay, cool. Sweet. All right. So, something I want to talk about, and I'm not complaining. I'm just more so letting people know. If you guys, I really, really try to interact in my comments on my social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, LinkedIn, Threads. I try to interact with everybody as much as possible when people tag me in posts and different things, right? But it makes it really, really difficult when everybody tags me in, especially social media creators. And I get it. And it is what it is. Like again, take this for what it is. Don't assume that I'm complaining. I'm just more or less stating some facts. The more people that tag me in, like if you're a social media creator and you tag me in every one of your posts, what it does is I know that you're trying to grow your platform and I get it. I'm not upset about that. But what it does is it fills up my activity feed on Instagram, on all these different platforms with your posts. And then I can't interact with my own because I don't have a lot of time. Like I don't stare at my phone all day long. So, just keep that in mind. I don't mind that people tag me. Like I get it. People are trying to grow their platforms and stuff. And I really got nothing against that. It's just sometimes it makes it a little bit harder for me to interact with people that are actually trying to get a hold of me. If you really want to message me, send me a direct message. I'll try to get to those. But even those is a struggle sometimes because, when people tag me in their stories, then it goes to my direct messages on Instagram and stuff. And it's just kind of like, it's hard to get through all those. But, these are creator problems. It is what it is, like, again, I can only do so much. And I try to interact with my chat as much as possible, but just keep that in mind. Okay. All right. Let's see. Thank you very much, Corbin. I really do appreciate you watching the videos. That's really awesome, man. Let's see what else. Rich, how are you, my good friend? Haven't seen you in a bit, or maybe you have been here, but it's hard to see screen names going by, but it's really cool to see Rich. That's a GT350R in there. Rich is a really cool dude. So good to see you in the chat, my friend. Let's see what else we got going on in here. Yeah, right on. Okay. So, I want to discuss something. So hot coming off the symposium. I already had one live stream, but the further and further I get away from the symposium, which if you don't know what the symposium is, Brian Orr put together this training event called the HVAC School Symposium. Okay. It's at his company headquarters in Claremont, Florida. He does it once a year. It was a week and a half ago now, and it was an amazing event. Like it was, borderline like life changing when I say that, and I'll try to explain it so it makes sense to everybody. But I'm coining the phrase a symposium depression, right? And that's kind of what I feel right now, because when you go to the symposium this year, especially, I looked around and I looked at all the people that were there, all the creators, all the presenters, and even the attendees. And I noticed that all of us are very similar in our personality and our character traits, in the way that we interact. A lot of us have a hard time communicating with certain people. But for some reason at the symposium, we all communicate really well. And it really does kind of make your brain think about, like, it's an event for like-minded individuals, right? That's a good way to put it. But when you go to an event like that and you spend 3 days, and I spent 3 days at the Animal House too, which is just this amazing, place that I was invited to stay at. But when you spend an event like that with that many people that are like-minded, when you leave that event and you go back to your normal life, it kind of messes with your head. And you kind of wish, like, at least for me, I kind of wish like I could be around those people all the time, because it's so interesting to be around engaging people that think like you do, and think about HVAC all the time and do all this different stuff. And it's not taken away from my friends at home and my family. Like, of course that's great too, but it's just something that messes with your head. It's really interesting. So it's the symposium depression for sure, right? It just kind of messes with your head because you just feel like you want to go back and hang out with everybody. Going to the symposium and hanging out with everybody too also made me realize that I need more like real people, right? Because I interact with a lot of my fake internet friends, right? But we don't see each other very often. But when you actually go hang out with people and my fake internet friends, right? You're like, wow, this is really cool. I don't know. These are first world problems to have, but it's just something that I've been like thinking about for the last couple of days. Very interesting. Dave Johnson was there. It was really cool to see everybody, and it's really neat too. Like, what I really like is I recognize Dave Johnson. He may or may not have seen me before I saw him, but he didn't approach me. And I happened to see him walking, through the parking lot. And it's like, hey, Dave, and like go shake his hand. And it's cool to be able to recognize people and be able to have an event like that you can go to and see people, and see your friends. And it's kind of neat. See what else we got going on here. Yeah, definitely. Curious HVAC guy just watched one of the videos with the goose on the roof. Oh yeah. Bill has some pretty funny videos. So Bill's a cool dude. Yeah, same thing, Dave Johnson. Like, I've been so busy since I got back from the symposium and from AHR and all that stuff, because I had a good 2.5 weeks of travel. I did AHR, then I came home for like 5 days, and then I went to the symposium for another 5 days, and it was just craziness, right? Fully unpacked my bag from the symposium yet. I pulled all my clothes out because I was running out of clothes and they needed to be washed, but it still has all my camera gear and microphones and stuff in it that I still got to go unpack and put away. It's kind of, like, unpacking is like the final thing from a vacation, and you tend to avoid it because you're like, you just don't want to let that vacation go, right? It's one of those weird things. But yeah, I never, there's a lot of sessions at the symposium that I missed, and I do have access because when you buy an in-person ticket, you also get a virtual ticket so you can watch the replays for so much time. I could be wrong, but I would highly suggest that you guys go to the HVACR school website, right? So it's hvacrschool.com. And if you go to there, you may or may not still be able to buy the virtual symposium tickets. It'll totally be worth it to be able to watch all the sessions, because there was some great sessions going on, and there was so much going on that it was hard to see them all. So let's see what else we got going on in here. Caden says that you experience the same exact thing when you go on vacation. Yeah, for sure. Let me see what we go in here. Jason Johnson said he'd love to hit AHR than the symposium. I have to admit, AHR for me has just become like, it's cool to see people, but the symposium is just like this event that you look forward to because I had no obligations at the symposium. So more or less the symposium was relaxing, and AHR was just like, I was scheduled here, scheduled there, scheduled here. And again, these are all first world problems. Like, I'm thankful to have these problems, but it's still stuff you have to deal with. So I enjoy this AHR, but the symposium by far is the best HVACR event that I have ever gone to in my life, and I plan to keep going. Next year, AHR will be in Orlando the weekend before, or actually the weekend after the symposium. So the symposium next year will be Thursday, Friday, Saturday in Claremont, Florida. And then in Orlando, Florida, AHR will start Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Orlando and Claremont are about 45 minutes away from each other with no traffic. So you can totally stay. Like, the very first time I went to the symposium, I stayed in Orlando and drove to the symposium every day. But I definitely do plan on going back next year, and it should be a good time for sure. So let's see what else we got going on here. Who put this in here? Comfort Medic said maybe next year you can do a speech or a presentation. Maybe, who knows? Let's see. Okay. Hello, Chris. How you doing, bud? Chris Willis from LinkedIn. Hello, hello. So again, everybody that's in here, it's all good. You can watch on LinkedIn. You can watch on Facebook. It doesn't make a difference. But on YouTube, if you watch this stream on YouTube, there's a huge chat with a bunch of people conversing back and forth. There's a conversation going on beyond what I'm talking about. So if you want to be part of that community, you definitely want to click over on YouTube. But again, it doesn't benefit me either way, whatever platform you watch it on. So Brandon, so this is a funny comment that we had found in my comments from the last video. And Brandon Cherry wanted to know if I hear bad motors and compressors in my sleep. So he's referring to my recent video where I was working on a hybrid walk-in freezer and I could hear a motor from across the roof. And this goes to when I discuss with people all the time, I highly stress that you do not wear headphones on the roof and that you do not play loud music on the roof unless you have to wear headphones or something for hearing protection. Totally understand for that reason. But when you're on a roof and you're working on something, you start to recognize the noises and you start to recognize sounds. And I was working on a walk-in freezer, and from across the roof, I could hear a condenser fan motor, the bearings in it going out. And so Brandon was kind of making a joke, questioning whether or not I hear that stuff in my sleep. There's probably something there. There's something about my brain. It's definitely I consider it to be like a neurodivergent brain because I go about things a different way than a lot of different people, right? So I don't have a lot of room in my brain. And unfortunately, and this is a flaw that I'm trying to fix, sometimes my family, my wife, my dad, my mom, they'll tell me things like, hey, we've got this event coming up. Hey, we've got this going on. And it goes in one ear and out the other. But I can remember part numbers for, a condenser fan motor. I can remember part numbers for a Delfield temperature controller, a coil sensing Delfield temperature controllers, a 2194536. Like I can remember that random number. I can remember my address from when I was in elementary school, but I can't remember what my wife tells me. That's important. And it goes in one ear and out the other. I want to remember what my wife tells me, but it just like falls on deaf ears basically, and this is a struggle that I have. I'm curious in the chat, and I know people are going to joke and say it's like selective hearing, but I genuinely want to remember the things that my wife tells me, but I just don't. Do you guys have that problem in the chat too? I'm very curious. Or is it just me? Am I just 8675309? Yeah. Don't call that, because the person that answers that phone number is not happy. They're just disgusted with that one. Oh, right on, the fixer. That's really cool, man. Let's see. Reading through the chat. What am I got going on in here? As a company owner, how do you handle back and forths with other vendors, i.e. water leak issues when a roofer refuses to set up a vendor meet? Evan, very good question. Okay, so first and foremost, I have always prided my company to be the go-to company. Customers will call me. I've literally had customers call me and say, I've got a leak coming out of my roof, and I'll have them send me a picture of it. I'll say, describe where it's at. They'll send me a picture and I'll say, that doesn't look like it's coming from any of my equipment. That looks like a roof leak, or that looks like a water leak. But they will still have me come out because I will identify leaks for them, red tag it, put tape on it or something, and then instruct them what to tell the plumber, what to tell the roofer. I've even taken spray paint on a roof because I found roof leaks and circled on the roof with spray paint, leak here, So in that situation, I try to do my due diligence. So if I go out to a call, let's just say the customer calls me, they say they have a water leak, and I go out there and I find it's not my problem, I will grab the customer by the hand. If the customer's willing, I'll tell them to climb up their own ladder, not my ladder. Climb up your own ladder, get your face up here. Look, I'm going to point to it. I'm going to show you the leak. I'm going to take pictures of it. And I'm going to say a plumber needs to fix this. And I go 10 steps further and I say, this is a main water line and there's no shutoffs on here. So you need to tell the plumber to be here, before you guys open, because he's going to have to shut off water to the building to fix this. I don't just like walk in and say, not my problem, peace, and bounce, right? The customer's paying me. I'm charging them for my time. So I'm going to give them value for what I'm charging them for, right? And I'm going to do that. Now, when it comes to vendors not wanting to do meetups, that's on the customer. That's not my problem. If I do have a vendor, I will tell the customer, hey, this is a struggle. I don't want to play the he said, she said game. You know, I'll go out there one time. Like it happens with me a lot of times with fire alarm systems, because fire alarm systems are a gray area and I run into problems with them. So I'll go out there once and I'll look at it and say, you've got an issue here. I don't think it's my problem. I would like you to schedule a meetup with the fire alarm company. And then the two of us can troubleshoot this instead of me saying, call him, and then him coming out saying, no, it's his problem. If I'm there with him and he says it's your problem, and I could say, no, it's not. Let's test it together. No, it's not. It's on your side. You know, I prefer to do those as much as possible. But if the company doesn't want to do the scheduled meetup, then you got to do what you got to do. And I just tell the customer, take pictures again, document everything and say, this is not our problem. Trust me, you want to do a meetup with the company. Here's another thing that a lot of people don't understand too. I work with a lot of corporate chains. Okay. I don't necessarily work with mom and pop restaurants, but it still would apply with mom and pops. But with the corporate chains, I have a direct line of communication to the corporate office, and I will usually contact them, and they have people that will schedule. And I love emails because emails are great because you schedule things in emails instead of verbal over the phone. That way there's a proof, right? So if I do a scheduled meetup, which this has happened and I've commented on it, if I do a scheduled meetup and the other vendor doesn't show, well, I've got it in an email chain that said they were going to show, right? And I have the corporate office CC'd in that email. You know, so then I'm like, hey, I showed up. I got to charge you for, 2 hours of my time or whatever it is. Here's the bill. And we still got to do another meetup with this vendor, and do that kind of stuff. So that recently just happened. And I have no problem billing for that. Like I feel for the customer, but I don't feel for the customer in a way that I'm willing to lose money, if that makes sense. So it's all about creating a paper trail, CCing the entire country in your email, making sure everything's explicitly clear in your emails, documenting everything in your invoices. And again, if they don't want to do a scheduled meetup with me, then, there's only so much I can do. I'm just going to document everything and let them know. Let's see what else we got going on in the chat. Reading through the chat real quick. It's a real issue. 100%. Sean says, yeah, for sure. That's funny. All right. So you guys it makes sort of sense. We make our waking hours immersed in HVAC. Yeah, that's 100%. So, why I can remember the jingle of an old ad decades ago, but you can't remember what you got up for. Oh, 100%, man. Same thing happens to me. Duncan says he blames his ADHD. There's an undiagnosed thing in my head, whether it's ADHD. Like I said, I know I have a neurodivergent brain that basically just thinks differently. It doesn't necessarily mean I have ADHD. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm autistic. I just know that the way that my brain comes up to solutions, I can compare notes with people, and it's so different than a lot of people. The way that I come up with math problems, I like backwards calculate things all the time. It's just different, and there's nothing wrong with that. But let's see what else we got going on in here. Did I find a solution for the rubber stoppers on my Vito? Maru, no, I just emailed Vito and they sent me a new bag. No questions asked. So far, they're not really too worn out. I've just been a little bit more conscious about sliding my bag when I roll it up on its top and like stopping it that way. But so far they're working fine. No issues. So, well, right on. Good luck. Brian says he's taking his state exam on Wednesday. That's awesome, bud. So let me cross that one off my list. I got a whole list of stuff that I need to get through today. So let's do that. Perfect. I already discussed that one. See, we're working through these things. Sometimes I have things on my list and then like I'll start talking about one thing and I'll segue into other things. Ooh, great question. So had a recent video working on a hybrid walk-in freezer, and a couple people asked me this question, and it was a really, really good question. So I tend to use a universal 9721 Fasco motor for condenser fan motors. And a couple people said, why are you using a refrigeration evaporator fan motor as a condenser fan motor? Okay, let's unpack this one. First off, when I'm working on rooftop equipment, it doesn't matter if it's Russell, if it's Heatcraft, if it's whatever. Oftentimes, it's difficult to stock every single motor in your truck. I happen to stock 9721s. 9721 is a universal Fasco motor. It's reversible. It's a PSC motor. It's multi-volt. It can do a bunch of different things, and it's a very reliable motor. It has ball bearings in it, and it has a universal mount. So It is classified as an evaporator fan motor, but I have had really good success with it operating as a condenser fan motor. Okay. So personally, I just evaluate the different options and kind of look at what's the best truck stock item to have in my truck. On the contrary or whatever, I actually don't allow my employees to use the 9721 as an evaporator motor because they're too long. The shaft is too long. There's way too many wires. And in my opinion, they never get tied up properly as an evaporator fan motor. And there's too much potential for something to short out, too much potential for something to get wet. So we only use, definite purpose PSC motors basically for evaporator fan motors, or regular shaded pole motors for evaporator fan motors. We don't use the universal 9721s for an evaporator fan motor. Now, in a 911, sure, but what you're going to find with a lot of the evaporator manufacturers, especially the old ones, if you try to put a 9721 in there, the back of the motor is going to rub up against the evaporator. It's a problem. People need to cut the bolts off, the studs off the back. That becomes a problem. And there's just way too many wires. So I personally only use the 9721 for a condenser fan motor, and that's it. I'm still paying attention to the horsepower, still paying attention to the RPMs, and the current that it is pulling basically. So it all still falls in line. I find that the 9721 operates perfectly fine as a condenser fan motor. I mentioned in the video that, and a lot of people commented about it, I mentioned that they only last about typically a year to 18 months is what I get out of those 9721s. That is the same lifespan that I get out of the OEM condenser fan motors. Some people are also asking me, why don't I go, because I'm in a sandy environment, why don't I go with a totally enclosed motor? Well, with the totally enclosed motor in the high ambient temperatures that I operate in, it just doesn't jive. The motors just burn up even faster. I like the open ones where the air goes over the motor and helps to cool it. When you're working in the harsh environments of the Coachella Valley, which is where you see most of those condenser fan motor failures, where they have sand and they have 120 plus degree temperatures in the ambient temps outside, it's just expected that you're going to go through motors and different components on a regular basis. And there's not a whole lot you can do. You can buy super crazy encapsulated contactors and all this different stuff, but the customer doesn't want to spend that much money. Right. And I don't stock that crap on my truck just for that location. It just doesn't make sense. So, it is what it is. We just do our best with that. And also too, you just got to kind of look at everything. If I go back with the factory OEM motor, which I love using OEM parts, but there's certain instances that I just don't see the value in putting in the OEM motor when it costs almost $100 more than the 9721 and it lasts just the same amount of time, if not less. That's a situation where I'm going to try to look after the customer's best interest and go back with the non-OEM, but I still try to go OEM on, like package units and stuff. But on little walk-in coolers and walk-in freezers, if it's not a big deal, I don't mind going with a non-OEM on that situation. Chain of Lake says, what symptoms would you expect to see on a Carrier weather maker with a clogged metering device? There's a couple different things that you can notice. First off, some trends that I notice on a so I'm assuming, okay, so let's just say this, a Carrier weather maker, assuming it doesn't have an expansion valve. If you're talking about a fixed orifice metering device, what you're typically going to see is you're going to walk up to it and you're going to see lower than normal saturation temperatures on the low side. Of course, you need to make sure the air filters are clean and the airflow is correct across the evaporator. Return air grills are clean. Once you know that's all good, then, obviously gauge up probes and everything. And what I'll tend to notice is really, really low saturation temperatures, higher than normal superheat. And then you start to think, okay, maybe I'm low on gas. You might add a little bit of gas and find out that your subcooling just continues to rise, but your superheat just continues to stay high. And basically, you just have lower than normal saturation temperatures. Another good thing, if it still has R22 in it, a good way to test it is start the system up. On startup, if you tend to notice that immediately your suction pressure goes way low and then slowly builds as it runs longer and longer, I tend to notice that's a pretty common trend with R22 that's still in the systems. Now, something I will tell you, if you have a system that has an alternative to R22 like 407C, I noticed that with 407C on a perfectly operating system. on startup, they always have a hard time and they pull very, very low on the low side, and then it slowly builds up. But I don't notice that on R22 systems that were meant for R22 when they're working properly. Typically, I just notice that on systems that tend to have plugged up metering devices. You can also notice on the fixed orifice metering devices, you can hit it with a thermal camera, or you can just visually look at it when it's running. You'll notice weird ice patterns where the feeder tubes are going into the fixed orifice metering devices. You'll see little patches of ice just on the spot where it's going into the system. And then you'll tend to notice weird freeze up patterns on the evaporator. Now, if you're talking about a thermostatic expansion valve, well, it's going to be very similar symptoms. Obviously, you can pay attention to your superheating, your subcooling on that. But you can tend to notice, just watching the system operate. So I don't know if that answers any of your questions, but, that's what I got for that one. I can't stress enough the people that are constantly telling me in my comments that I'm a horrible person and I'm going to kill someone because I don't cut my zip ties off properly. Guys, if we can't, as technicians, operate in a system that has high temperatures and moving condenser fan blades and all this different stuff, and we're, worried about a zip tie, come on, right? Cut the zip ties off and just be careful when you're sticking your arms in things. I personally don't carry flush cuts on me. If you do, so be it. That's great. But I don't see the need to spend all that time using a flush cut just to make sure that the zip ties cut as short as you can. Someone in my comments made a really good point that even if you use flush cuts, there's going to be a little end sticking out. And they said, if you really, really want to get technical, grab an old set of nail clippers and use the nail clippers, and you can really get down in there and get it cut really well. But still, we're splitting hairs trying to go that crazy with systems. We have, as technicians, have to operate in dangerous environments all the time. So, come on, a zip tie. But maybe I'm wrong. Send me your pictures. If you got a picture where your artery got cut from a zip tie, hey man, maybe I'm wrong completely. I don't know. If you know someone that bled out because they got cut from a zip tie, I'm sorry. Maybe I'll retract my statement if you can send me those pictures. So let's see what else we got going on here. Yeah, they do start freezing up for sure. So let's see. Your kid asked you who she was, and you told him her name. I don't know. Oh, you must have a conversation there. Yeah, Train has the double orifice. Carrier has a double orifice too. So let's point this out. I have some videos, and I don't have them. Do I have? Hold on, just one sec. Look at, you guys reminded me. So this is a cutaway of a fixed orifice metering device for a carrier unit. So these, we call this an actuator metering device. It's been sitting over there, so it's kind of dusty. Okay, notice something. There's two dimples, right? You see one here and one here. Each one of those is a metering device. It's a double metering device in there. If you look right here, let's see if I can get the camera to focus, and it's going to have a hard time focusing. Each one of those little flat pieces right there, one and one, each one of those is a metering device. So if you cut away a carrier fixed orifice metering device, there is a double orifice in there. There's two sides to that guy. So with that being said, oh, here's a perfect example. This one right here, okay? So this is the one that I did the cutaway from. And if you look right here, you can see the little orifice right there, right? And this is the other side of that. So there's two orifices, and they're about 1/4 of an inch apart, okay? So that one goes right there. And then that's where you would see the double dimple, because there's two orifices there. With that being said, I know everybody says that they love to say that you can clear a fixed orifice metering device by heating it up and pushing nitrogen in both directions. But I really, really would like to know how you push something through two orifices, because once you get it through one orifice, there's going to be a pressure drop, right? So then you'd have to build up the pressure high enough again in between those two orifices to push it through another orifice. I don't think it's really doing what everybody thinks it's doing when they say that they're clearing the orifices. Once the oil, what typically, in my opinion, causes these fixed orifice metering devices to plug up. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, on the carrier, especially the R22 package units, but they do this on the 410A units too, you won't see an expansion valve on some of the systems, and you'll just see a liquid header like this. And it's just, each one of these has double metering devices in it, and each one of these goes to a different circuit on the evaporator. How do I know that stuff, right? How do I know that thing has a double orifice? Because I just got curious and started cutting things apart. That's all it is, right? Before I even started this YouTube thing, it's like, hey, I'm going to cut an expansion valve apart. I want to try to figure out how it works, right? Because everybody tells you all the voodoo magic and all this different stuff, and it doesn't make sense. My gosh, when I went through trade school and they tried to explain how an expansion valve works, they make it so flipping complicated that it's completely difficult to understand, right? Go get a flare valve. This is a flare valve. Put it in a bandsaw and cut it apart, okay? Simplest way to explain this. We don't need to get all complicated. You have a diaphragm up top that has pressure in it that's pushing down on a needle, okay? It reacts to temperature. When that thing pushes down on a needle, it opposes the force of a spring down in the bottom that lifts a seat right there, right? And the liquid comes up through here, goes through the valve, but then it sits at a little orifice right here. And when the high temperature of the suction line builds the pressure in this power head and pushes down and opposes the force of that spring, it allows refrigerant to go through the valve. On this valve right here, if this power head loses its pressure charge, this valve no longer feeds. It completely closes because the spring pressure on the bottom seats that and doesn't allow refrigerant to go through it anymore. I'm sorry, but when I went through trade school, and they start trying to tell you all the different forces and they start to confuse you. If they would have just cut apart a valve and showed me and said explained to me with small words how a valve works, it would make so much more sense than just trying to give me theory of, all these different forces that act on the valve. And it's like, hey, just cut it apart and show it to me, because I'm a person that likes to see things. My brain just processes things differently. Okay. Let's see what else. Black magic. That's right. Let me see what else we got going on here. All right. Already covered that one. I'm covering or marking some things off my list. Oh yeah, we already covered that. Man, we're moving through these questions. This is awesome. Okay. So again, you guys have questions or comments or things you want me to cover, throw it in the chat, put them in caps lock. I'll try to get to them. And, if I miss your question, shoot me an email, hvacrvideos@gmail.com. So, Freightliner 66540. Hey, if you guys think about it, when you guys send me a comment, sometimes your screen names are like so long, it's silly to read them. In your comments, say Chris, Bob, Steve, or something like that, just so that way I know your name. But says he prefers changing motors and blades together when he's changing condenser fan motors. I agree. I wholeheartedly prefer to change motors and blades together. Notice if you see me working on a package unit, a lot of the times I change a motor and a blade, because oftentimes when I'm working on package units, it's not a 911 situation. When I'm working on refrigeration equipment, we have to get it operating and running within hours. We don't have time to order parts, and wait for things to come in majority of the time. In a perfect world, if I could just have all the parts in my truck, I would stock condenser fan blades for refrigeration equipment and change them out when I change the motors, because that is a good practice. But, it's hard to stock blades because they get all destroyed. Hell, it's even hard to get a good non-bent fan blade from a supply house. Like, that's actually something that I've talked to several manufacturers about. I was just going back to the factory when I was I went to Tifton, Georgia with my friends from Heatcraft Refrigeration, and I went to their Stone Mountain plant too last year. But I just went back and we were talking about parts and different things, and I was telling them, like, one of my frustrations is supply houses, they just order these blades in bulk and then they just throw them on the shelf and they're all bent. You can take 12-inch evaporator condenser fan motor blades from a supply house and just set them on the counter and make sure all the blades touch the counter at the same depth and everything, and they never do. They're always out of balance. And it's because the supply houses order them in bulk and just have them in a giant box. I appreciate that, like Heatcraft Refrigeration, when they ship their blades, they put them in an individual box and you actually get them in a box. And that's a good thing. But whether or not the supply house keeps them in the box is the question, right? Let's see. What else we got going on in here? You love to fight with the rusty shafts to pull blades. Yeah. Just when you walk up to something that's rusted out or someone cut it off with a grinder and it's mushroomed out, just remember that. Take some sandpaper and a file up there with you and some penetrating oil, whatever brand you like, dab it on there. Use a crescent wrench on one end of the flat end of the blade or of the shaft, and then spin the blade with the, hold the shaft with the crescent wrench and spin the blade around. And slowly, after you've sanded the blade, just slowly start working it off as you're spinning it. And most of the time you'll get them off pretty good. Sometimes though, it's impossible and you have to change them. You got to do what you got to do. All right. So that was a good point that Freightliner had made. Let's go to the next one here. Okay, so Mark had asked me a really good question. And unfortunately, like, I would love to talk about this more. And this is something that I've always wanted to figure out how to do, but it's almost impossible. And that is to record my interactions with the customer, because oftentimes you guys just hear me say that I brought it to the customer's attention and they agreed with me. I would love to be able to record my conversations with the customer in the way that I educate the customer and let them know what's wrong and get their approvals. But it's just not one of those things that, customers don't want to be recorded. They don't want, getting permission for that stuff is just a giant nightmare. Okay. So, when it comes to talking with customers, Mark had a really good question. And then Apache FPV said he struggled with it his first year too. And that's interacting with customers. But Apache made a good point. He said, once you become confident in your knowledge, when you're communicating with the customers, it flows. And there's a lot of truth in that. So once you really start to understand the way that something works, when you go down to the customer, it's a lot easier to explain it. But okay, what about those customers that when you walk in the door, they think that you've done something wrong? Because I have those customers still to this day. It's about confidence. When I go up to those customers, first off, I'm not being rude. I'm not being condescending, but I'm skating a line of going in and saying, look, when a customer is really, really upset, I'll say, hey, like, I get it. I know you're upset. I know we've been out here 2 times, but I'm here now. Let me get up there. I'll get it figured out and I'll let you know what I find. Right. I'm not going in there saying, I never apologize. Okay. That's number one. You never walk into a customer and immediately apologize. Okay. Oftentimes customers want you to apologize, but then customers take that as you're admitting guilt or admitting fault. Don't ever do that. Okay. Now, always be honest with your customers. If you guys screwed something up, own up to it and be fair and be honest with them. But I never go in and say, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm here now. I'm going to fix your problems. Michael Metzger, thank you very much for that super chat, man. I really, really appreciate that, bud. Thank you so very much. I always go into the customer and I say, look, I'm here to fix the problem. Let me get my eyes on it. I'll let you know what I find and we'll make it right, whatever we got to do. Okay. So I'm not saying we're going to give it to them for free. I'm not saying we're wrong. I go up and I evaluate the system, and I'm going to be honest with you, a good majority of the time, it is not our fault. There is some times where it is something that we messed up, and I always own up to the customer in that situation. Okay. But even owning up to the customer, sometimes you need to be cautious about things. Okay. Because, let's just say that one of my technicians, I'll give you guys an example. So probably about 20 years ago, we had a service call where it wasn't a service call. I was working on a walk-in freezer and I was changing a door with my then senior mechanic. I was an apprentice at the time. Okay. I was changing a walk-in freezer door. I had a senior mechanic there with me. We were there all day long. And then we left the job and we left the disconnect off at the condensing unit. Okay. They didn't notice until the next day. So we left the walk-in freezer off that afternoon, 2:00 in the afternoon. They called us the next morning at 7 a.m. and they said, my walk-in freezer's high in temp. What happened? And then we went out there and we found that the switch was off. The customer was out there with us. We turned the switch on. It started working. And the customer said, we need to throw away all of our food and you have to pay for the food. Okay. So we had a discussion with the customer and we politely said, look, we made a mistake. We left the equipment off, but you can't fault us for you guys not doing routine temperature checks. So what we ended up doing in that situation was we split the cost of the food with the customer. Now that still cost us about $7,000 at the time because they threw away about $14,000 in food. Okay. But the customer agreed. Okay. I covered half. They covered half. We were square and we still work for that customer to this day. So we always try to be fair, but we always try to make sure that they understand that, like, hey, there's some fault here on your guys' side too. Yes, we left the disconnect off, but you can't tell us that it's our fault that you didn't check the box temp and you didn't call us an hour after we left, 2 hours after we left. Customers need to be checking their box temperatures and, doing that kind of stuff. So don't ever walk in and just say, it's my fault. I'm going to, pay for everything. No, you evaluate everything. Always be honest with the customer, but be fair to yourself too. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. That's some weird situation that I would always try to make right with the customer. But once you gain knowledge in something, it becomes a lot easier to discuss it. But be very, very careful, because when you do gain knowledge, sometimes you can step up on a pedestal and you're on a high horse and you're like, I have so much knowledge, I'm going to tell you all this stuff. And you make the customer feel dumb. Okay. Because you're like talking down to them. I'm a very, very open person when I go to my customers. And when they ask me a question, sometimes I'll stop and I'll think about it. And I say, okay, I'll tell the customer, I don't want to make you feel, confused. I can give you a really technical explanation, or I can break it down in a way, but I don't want you to feel like I'm dumbing something down for you. You tell me what you want. And then I'll let them say, well, I want a technical explanation. Okay, here's what's going on. And I'll give it to them. And then they're like, that doesn't make sense. Can you kind of make it a little more understandable? And then I'll break it down and give them some analogies and explain something. Okay. But I always give them the option, because I don't want them to feel like I'm just going to go in there with a bunch of technical jargon and make them feel dumb to where they approve something because they don't understand it. I want my customers to always understand what I'm saying, because I don't want to work for this customer and make $5,000 off this job and never work for them again. I want to make $2,000 off this job and work for them for the next 20, 30 years and continuing doing these kind of jobs for them, right? I want them to trust me, and I want them to have faith that I will make things right and explain things in a way that they can understand it. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. So let's see what else. No politics in the chat. Yeah, let's keep politics out, guys. Okay, please. Let me see what else we got going on here. Do my customers know I'm recording the job? The answer to that question is yes and no. So I work for a lot of corporate chains, and the corporate chain themselves typically know the higher ups, but the everyday end user that's working at the restaurant, yeah, I don't really make a blatant like, hey, I'm recording in here. That's why you tend to see me recording more on the roof or in walk-in boxes. Recording ice machines is always difficult because there's always music playing around me. So I try not to make it really obvious what I'm doing. At the same time, I have to remember something. My first priority is to fix the customer's equipment. I have to do that in a timely fashion. And oftentimes I have to discount my bills if I end up spending a lot of time filming. I usually don't, because the way that I troubleshoot, I literally talk to myself. So it's really no different just holding a phone while I'm troubleshooting something. But at the same time, I have to keep that in the back of my mind, and I try to make it right for the customer, because I don't want them to ever feel like I'm ripping them off because I'm making a video. On the flip side, yes, my customers do know. I've been contacted by several of them, because they appreciate the fact that a lot of the things that I work on are the exact same problems that they have in locations all across the United States that I can't service. And other technicians that work in those same locations get to watch how I fix the problems, and then they can duplicate that. And it helps the restaurant chains in general all across the country. So the restaurants do see that value and appreciate that. But it's just one of those things, the on-site management, they don't really understand. But I don't technically work for the on-site management at any of my locations. I'm respectful and polite to them, but I actually work for the corporate offices, and the corporate office is the one that approves everything I do. The on-site management is more or less just a supervisor to make sure that I show up and actually make it work. And then they report back to the upper management to say, yeah, Chris fixed it, and that kind of stuff. So, can I explain what a hybrid freezer is? Yeah, Simon. It's just a term that I made up, really. A typical walk-in freezer that I work on cools the temperature down to -10 degrees. What I call a hybrid freezer, I mentioned in the video, maintains about 28 degrees inside the box. So it's right below freezing. So it's below 32 degrees, but it's not -10. So I call it a hybrid freezer because it's right in between. I recently had a technical rep from Copeland mention something, that's not a hybrid freezer, whatever. I don't know. He had some jargon that he called it. And he was saying that a hybrid freezer is typically a freezer that can be a cooler or a freezer. And I don't see that to be true, because we would call that a dual temp box. If you have a dual temp box, then it could be a cooler or a freezer with a flip of a switch. I don't consider something that's maintaining 28 degrees to be a dual temperature box or a hybrid. I mean, a dual temp. No. So anyways, hopefully that makes sense for you. How long does my battery last while filming? Well, I film with my phone, so I keep my battery charged all the time. Honestly, batteries aren't my problem. It's hard drives. All my phones have to be 1 terabyte hard drives, and I usually have 2 to 3 videos stored on a phone at any given time. But I can only keep about 2 to 3 full length videos on there because I typically fill up the 1 terabyte hard drive that's on the phone with that, because I film in 4K 60 frames per second. So it fills up the phone super fast. So does hot gas defrost function like a heat pump? I mean, there's similarities to a heat pump, but it's not necessarily the same. You know, in a hot gas defrost is not meant to run that way for long periods of time. Okay. Hot gas defrost is only meant to run in defrost mode for short lengths of time. Typically doesn't have to defrost as long. On an electric defrost system, on a walk-in freezer, we're typically going to defrost for 30 to 45 minutes. On a hot gas defrost, because the hot refrigerant is dumping into the evaporator, it's typically going to defrost in a lot faster, sometimes 15, sometimes 10 minutes, something like that. The theory is similar, but on a hot gas defrost, they typically just open a liquid line solenoid valve that dumps discharge gas into a separate line, depending on the type of the setup that it is. So a heat pump itself completely reverses the flow of refrigerant and is meant to last and run that way for extended periods of time. So even with hot gas defrost, there's some other things we're going to have to factor into consideration. And you may or may not have to have desuperheating expansion valves on hot gas defrost, because you need suction gas coming back to the compressor that's cool. So, you know, you may or may not have to do that depending on how fancy the system is, basically. Would I consider doing a bloopers reel for my videos, Daniel? I mean, I do them every once in a while. You just have to pay attention. There's several videos out there that I have bloopers in the end of the video, but I don't have like one specific video that I can tell you. Just every once in a while, I get silly and kind of throw them in the end of the video. So have I ever had to clean a really, really nasty exhaust fan that I never want to clean but have to? You know, sure, but I actually don't clean exhaust fans. That's not part of my business model. I have had to somewhat clean an exhaust fan to like change a motor and stuff like that, but there's professional exhaust fan cleaning companies that come out, and I let them stay and do the job that I can't do, essentially. Because when you're cleaning exhaust fans, it's not just a matter of spraying off the exhaust fan and putting a degreaser on it. That degreaser has to be cleaned up and thrown in the trash. It's not really supposed to go down the drain. And then you have to use special chemicals that don't damage the roof. There's a lot that goes into exhaust fan cleaning, and it's not just cookie cutter, spray a degreaser, rinse it, and move on, because you don't want that grease going into the roof drains or anything, because then it's just going to plug up the roof drains. So yeah, I let the exhaust cleaning companies take care of that. Do I plan on installing an ERV in my house? Yeah, that is more than likely going to be what I'm going to do for my fresh air in my house. I've changed the air conditioner in my house, if everybody doesn't know yet. And I made a whole series, the HVACR videos, home HVAC series or something like that. It's on my channel. Just go look in the playlist and you'll see me go through the entire process of changing the air conditioner in my house. So I have it running. Everything's good. 2 things left to do. I need to install fresh air, because I did design my system accounting for fresh air, and I very good probability I'm going to use an ERV to bring that fresh air in. And next I need to do jumper ducts in every room to relieve the room pressurization issues. My master bedroom is the worst. I think it might be pressurized to like 12 pascals at this point, and that's a bit too much to where when you actually shut the bedroom door, when the room pressurizes, it no longer allows the air to come out of the supply duct because it's pushing too hard and there's too much pressure in the room. So it slows down the delivered CFMs coming into that room. JJ Services, HVACR. Thank you very much for that super chat. I really, really do appreciate it. Christian says, what sources do I recommend to learn makeup air systems? Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know if I know of a book that teaches you how makeup air works. You know, makeup air has always kind of come to me. Man, that's an interesting one. I would lean on the manufacturers of the equipment, but I mean, let's just break it down into the simplest fashion. Okay. You have a building that has an exhaust fan. Think of that building as a paper bag. If you put a paper bag over your face and you inhale, the bag is going to collapse. Okay. If you cut a hole in the bottom of the bag, the right size hole, as you inhale, the air is going to pass through the bag and it's not going to collapse anymore. So think of your building, right? So basically, you want in a restaurant, you want to have slightly positive pressure. Now, there's an actual number that you want to have, but you want to have slightly positive pressure in the building. you don't want to make the building negative, because what you want to do is you want to slightly overpressurize the building to the point that you're exhausting out what you need to, but you're bringing fresh air in at a rate that it's not going to suck the doors shut, but it's also not going to positively pressurize the building to where the doors push open. It's a very, very fine number that you need to do. It's also not as simple as just saying positive pressure. Depending on the type of building, the type of restaurant, you need to make sure that you have positive pressure in the right spaces, right? And you need to make sure that you don't have too much air passing across the pass out line where they have hot food, because you don't want cold building air pulling across that to go to the exhaust fans. So it is a little bit more, and you want to pressurize the kitchen to a certain extent. And, you know, you got to do a lot with fresh air in the AC units too. But as far as learning about makeup air systems, that's a really good question. I honestly don't know where to tell you to go to completely learn about fresh air systems. I'm curious if the chat has any recommendations on where to learn about makeup air systems and stuff. That's a really good question. What brands of makeup air do I work on? There's a lot of swamp coolers. There's a lot of dry coolers, Captive Air, Green Heck, Accurex, Cook. There's a lot of off brands that I work on. I mean, there's a bunch of different ones. I don't typically get into the fancy modulating gas direct fired makeup air units. I have like 3 or 4 of those, just a handful of them. Most of the time we don't have heated makeup air units. They typically have some sort of evaporative cooling to them. I do not have any DX cooled makeup air units. That's the ones where they have an air conditioning coil on them. Currently don't have any of those at all, but I can think of a million different restaurants that could utilize those. I think that the answer to a lot of our problems is DOAS units. The problem with the DOAS units is they're rather complicated. They're rather expensive, but I feel like a lot of these restaurants should be installing 1 to 2 DOAS units in the kitchen, sizing them appropriately so they don't have to have non-conditioned makeup air units. On a DOAS unit, it's a dedicated outdoor air system. And a lot of those units, they can either be just a straight package unit, or they can be 100% outside air. So that's really good, because you could throttle it to a point that you're pulling maybe 60% outside air, but you're still pulling 40% building air, and they can still cool the building air down to good temperatures. And they would satisfy the need for a dedicated makeup air unit if you have it built into the package unit. Let's see what else we got going on in the chat. Okay, I already answered that question. Cool. Okay, let me get to the chat, or let me get to my list of questions. So I am going to mention that on my website, hvacrvideos.com, Too Many Hobbies Jeremy actually made a comment on a YouTube video thanking me because I lowered the price of my zip-up hoodies. So on my website, hvacrvideos.com, we do sell merchandise. We have hats, beanies, sweatshirts, t-shirts, stickers, couple different styles of hats, and we have zip-up hoodies. So I slashed the prices of my zip-up hoodies down to $25. I want to say it was like $48. Okay. I don't really make a lot of money on my merchandise, and I spent a lot of money trying to buy a really high quality sweater. But in all honesty, the sweaters don't sell the way that I want them to. I've had a massive inventory of sweaters for over 2 years now. So I basically just slashed them to my cost, because I just want to move them out. We're not going to be restocking the sweaters. I will tell you, they're very high quality, comfortable sweaters. They're a full zip up hoodie. I don't have one with me right now, but if you go to my website, you want to support it, I dropped the price down to $25 within the United States. That $25 includes shipping. I'll ship it to you anywhere in the US. If you're in Canada, there's still going to be the Canadian shipping fee, because they just slam on a bunch of money to be able to ship things to Canada. But the base price is $25, and that's basically cost, probably a little bit below cost, but I just want to move them out. We are doing the same thing for the t-shirts. We're going to be moving the t-shirts out. I don't think we're going to be bringing t-shirts back. I don't think we're going to be bringing sweatshirts back. We're going to just stick with what sells, which is the beanies, the hats, and the stickers. I never planned on doing merch. That was never my thing. A bunch of people asked me, so I decided to do it, and then I went a little crazy with some of it. But it all is high quality stuff. I put a lot of effort into making this stuff. So if you want to help support things, go to hvacrvideos.com. So, and we do have women's shirts too. So, Freon Leon says, been wearing my hat for 2 years now, washed it about 4 times, still looks damn near new. Yeah, I love the hats. There's a couple different designs. The most popular hat is this one right here. This is the Flex Fit hat. So I put a lot of effort into this. What you can't see is that I can see light through this hat, but it's not a trucker hat. Okay. It's not a mesh hat, but it's very breathable. So the sweat, you sweat a lot less in this hat. Black underbill, that was really important for me because we get dirty fingers. We go home. I want to wear my hat, personal time, whatever. I purposely didn't put my logo on this hat. I just put my color scheme and the HVACR acronym because I didn't want it to violate any uniform policies. People buy these hats and use them for their work hats. They're not necessarily advertising my brand. They're just supporting my brand, right? So we purposely did that. We put a lot of thought into these. They are a flex fit. Now we do have snapback that are flex fit that are flat bill. We have those ones too available on the website. And we have a dad hat for those people that have really short foreheads and are bald. But unfortunately the dad hat, if I put it on, this much of my forehead still sticks out because I have a giant forehead. So, Jason Johnson, you had mentioned sometimes you wish you had a van because I did a van tour recently, so that you could fit all your tools in it. And then he could buy more. But he says, other than that, he loves being in a truck with a utility bed. So I drove a truck. I had a Chevy 2500 with a extended cab with the doors that open backwards, the Chevy ones. And then I had an 8-foot utility bed on it with a rolling cover on it. I loved that truck. My favorite thing about driving a truck was it was super quiet. You didn't hear a single thing because you didn't have tools in the cab typically. And it was just quiet. You can listen to the radio. It was nice and cool all the time. The things that I didn't like about a utility bed was that truck was gutless and it had the 6-liter V8 in it. And it was just gutless because the bed was so heavy. Okay. It was difficult going up a hill. It struggled. It needed a diesel is what it needed, but I didn't want to have the maintenance costs of a diesel. The other thing that sucked about having a utility bed was that you had to stand out in the rain to get your parts. And then when you would open the top bins, when it was raining, to get fittings and different things and PVC fittings and all that crap, it would all get wet too. That always sucked. Or if you needed refrigerant out of the back, you had to push the roll top back, climb in there, sticking your legs out. That was a pain, but I really, really did love how quiet it was to drive that thing. I do miss the truck for that fact. All right. Let's see what else we got going on. Awesome One says you recently passed your 608. That's really awesome. Really, really cool. Says, what advice can you give you that would help you get hired when applying for apprentice tech jobs? So enroll in school, enroll in like night classes at a community college, get 1 class under your belt, maybe 2, then go to a company and say, hey, I've enrolled in school. I've been taking night classes. I'd love to come work for you, an apprentice, and I want to continue taking night classes at nighttime and work during the day. What that's going to do is that's going to show the company that you really do want to work in the trade and you have initiative. Okay. If you already finished school, then great, but go to the school with something. I mean, go to the company with something. Now, even if you're applying for a union company, it's still going to show them that, hey, I started work going to community college, and then you go to the union hall and, you do all your stuff. That's fine. But just show them that you have initiative. Understand that if you try and you try and you try and nobody's hiring you, then you need to reflect on yourself. Okay. Look at yourself and say, how could I be different? Is your attitude bad? Is your work ethic bad? Is your appearance bad? If you're having a hard time getting a job, 99% of the time, I'm going to say there's something going on with you that you need to fix. Okay. Because right now we are hurting for technicians and a lot of people want to hire. So they're not going to be as picky right now. But just show initiative and you're definitely going to get picked up by someone. So let's see what else we got going on the chat. All right. Okay. So this person said they're starting a refrigeration company and they have a few questions. They want to know, where did I order my van with the shelves in it? And where did I get my silver sliding drawers from? Okay. So first and foremost, I just get my vans from the Chevy dealership. Chevrolet has an upfitter package that they typically give you a $2,500 credit when you purchase a van that applies towards upfitting it with shelves or racks or ladders or something like that. We typically buy our vans with a basic shelving package in it and a ladder rack on it. And then I customize the van like you guys saw on my van tour. As far as the rolling drawer unit, that is from American Van. I have no affiliation with them. They're just a website that I get van products from. And yeah, American van, you can buy that rolling thing. I think it might have cost 800, 1200, something like that. I don't remember exactly how much, but why Chevy and not Ford? Just always been a Chevy person. Used to have Ford vans in the past. Obviously they don't make the Econoline van anymore. Now they make the Transit van. Not a huge fan of the Transit vans or any of the Euro style vans. Unfortunately, Chevy's going to a Euro style van in the next year or two, which is kind of a bummer because the Express van is very predictable and very reliable for me, at least in my area. But yeah, just, you know, I've driven Ford vehicles just for the work vans. I've just always done the Chevy vans. I had a Econoline van years ago, but then we've all been Chevy since then. So, Jonathan says, be careful who you work for and do some vetting first. Your advice. Oh, that's your advice. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a good point to be made there by Jonathan. And that's, remember that when you go for an interview with a company, it's a two-way interview. You're interviewing that company just as much as they're interviewing you. Don't be cocky. Don't be a jerk, but ask the right questions. You want to know things. Don't leave without asking the questions. Don't hire on at a company if you're not sure how things are going to work out. Ask questions. Be that person. The more informed you are, the better you're going to be with that company. So, how many trucks do I have? We're a very small company. We have 4 vans in the field, including mine. So I have 3 techs that are driving vans, and then we have 2 office staff. So, all right. Okay, so someone had asked me, why in the heck do I go with the regular size vans instead of the high roof vans? That's a really good question. I'd love to have a high roof van that I can stand up in. That'd be awesome. But I live in a high wind area, and it's very difficult to drive high profile vehicles. At least 4 to 5 times a year, we have a very high wind event time when we call it the Santa Ana winds, when we can get gusts up to 80 miles an hour, and diesel trucks are just blowing over left and right, especially if they're empty. If you've got empty diesel trucks coming into SoCal via the 15 freeway south, coming from like Vegas and Victorville and stuff, and they're coming down the Cajon Pass, good majority of the time, right when they get to the bottom of the Cajon Pass, those empty trucks, they're going to be blown over, flipped over. It's a big problem we have. So driving a really high profile vehicle can be problematic. Also, if you drive high profile vehicles, it makes it almost impossible to be able to operate in parking garages and things like that. I can still operate in some parking garages, especially for some of the shopping malls and different things in my area, because they do have utility vehicle parking for the parking garages. So just a personal preference. And then HVAC Slayer brought up a good point. HVAC Slayer just had his van broken into, and he said they just destroyed everything. I too, in the past, it's been a long time, probably about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I had a van broken into. It was a matter of like 2 minutes. 2 minutes. I had gone in and I came back out to get something, and they took like $10,000 worth of tools, and yeah, they didn't even care about parts or refrigerant. They just took tools. It was over $10,000 in tools out of my van. That was a bummer. That's when we realized that our auto insurance, our commercial auto insurance, didn't cover any of the tools. We learned a hard lesson. And then we had to get a marine policy to cover all of our vans, and it's just a nightmare. So, I'm very careful about where I park my vehicles. I don't park my van even at my house. I park it behind a locked gate. When I'm out in locations, I don't leave it in shady parking lots for very long. If I have a customer that has a really shady parking lot and I get a van broken into, odds are, unless that customer does something, we're no longer going to be doing work for them. Like, we have to look out for our vehicles. So we try to take care of our vehicles and make sure they're not in bad locations. It's on occasion, like I just had another employee, he parked his van at his apartment complex and it got broken into. It wasn't his fault, but for now he's parking the van at the shop because it's been broken into 2 times at his apartment complex, and we just can't leave it there anymore. It's just too much of a problem. The last time they busted the whole dash up, busting the ignition. We had to have it was just a mess, man, but they didn't even get into the back. Like, it was silly. They just tried to steal the van is all they tried to do. All right. Do I have CO2 or A2L systems? No CO2 systems, A2L, not yet, but I work on a lot of A3 systems. So I'm not disappointed or worried about A2L at all. A3 is hydrocarbon refrigerants. That's highly flammable. A2L is just mildly flammable. It's not even really anything to worry about. Just follow some basic safety practices. But A2Ls are coming, any day now. I'm not afraid of it at all. Let me see what else we got going. Do my techs park in the streets? Not very often at all. So we don't work in locations. Christopher says Harupa Valley winds are insane. Yeah, that's 100% true. Yeah, that's where I'm from, is Harupa Valley, and the winds that we get all through the Inland Empire are just insane. So Fontana, yep, same thing. How long did it take for my business to grow where it is now? Surprisingly, our business used to be bigger, but we scaled it down. Never gotten really big. The most technicians we've ever had at one point in time was 6 technicians, and that was just a little bit too much for us to handle. We like to stay small and stay within our core little niche area. So, I mean, what A3 charging kit am I using? Currently at the moment, I have the JB scale. I'm not going to go out on a limb and say the JB scale is the perfect thing for charging. It's not. There's flaws to the JB scale. The resolution and the increments at which it measures the grams is too far apart. I think it does it in like 5 gram increments or 3 gram. I don't know what it is, but I don't know. I haven't found something that I'm truly in love with. I used to have the Yellow Jacket charging scale, and that was just silly because you had to use like the offset adapter, and I don't know. That was just a pain in the butt. But all right, let's see what else we got going on in here. You can actually be more proficient and make more money by scaling down and slowing down. Yeah, we had to make some changes in our business when we lost a few employees, and we realized that we were just pushing everybody too far. So we scaled down, reduced our service area. Life got better, changed the on-call rotation, and made it a little bit easier for the guys, so they weren't on call for a week at a time anymore, and just tried to scale things back. And it's really easy to lose control of your business and lose sight of what's important the bigger you get. For us, our reputation is everything. The way that we treat our customers is, with integrity and honesty. And the bigger you get, the easier it is for you to lose sight of that. And, then it just starts getting frustrating, hard to control. And for us, again, I'm not a great business person. I'm going to be the first person to tell you, I am my own worst critic when it comes to my flaws. And running a business is not my forte. Like I genuinely hate running a business. I love helping people, fixing things, and running service calls. I despise running a business, genuinely. Like, I hate being in the office. Field Piece, take notes. Yeah, Field Piece needs to come out with a charging scale for R290 systems that measures down to the gram. Like, seriously, someone does. I will say that Infocon, who makes the Stratus leak detector, I was at the Symposium, and they were saying that they have a scale that measures, it's either in 1 gram increments or 3 gram increments, which is an improvement, but still not what I want it to be. So, speaking of on-call, how do I work my on-call rotation and pay? So basically, our on-call rotation is you are only on call for 3 days at a time, at the most, okay? We're a small enough company that we have each one of our techs has a day during the week, okay? Well, actually, it's not each one of our techs. I take 2 calls. Another one of my techs takes 2 of the days. And then we have 1 tech that takes 1 of the days. But basically, you're either on call for 1 day during the week, or you're on call for 3 days during the weekend, and then it rotates. So if you're on call for, let's say, I was on call for last weekend, okay? Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So that means that I'm automatically on call on Thursday. And then the following week, I'll be on call on Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday, then Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then it just keeps rotating, and that works for every person. So I figured out the on-call schedule for the entire year. We get that out to all the technicians so that way they can plan their year and they know when they're going to be on call. And the most they're ever on call is for 3 days in a row. And that's just how it works for us. Okay, so Infocon is 3 gram increments. Yeah, we need it in 1 grams. What's my opinion on commercial refrigeration versus heating and cooling calls? What do I prefer? I actually like them both. Refrigeration's fun, but doing in restaurants, like, there's times that refrigeration can get a little silly because it's really dirty and gross down inside the reach-ins and different things. But I like working on air conditioning equipment too. I like working on exhaust fans. I like working on ice machines. So I equally like it all. It just depends. And I like the fact that it's always something different, right? Even though it's like, I'm working on a walk in here, I'm working on a walk in there. something's a little different about every job. So I like the fact that today I worked on a heater, and then I worked on, what else did I work on? I worked on something else. No, I think I just worked on a heater today, and then, worked on an ice machine on Saturday. Every day it just might be something different. So, would I ever work on big commercial rack refrigeration? No, I mean, it sounds interesting, and I would love to learn rack refrigeration. My buddy Brett Wetzel and Kevin Compass, they do the Advanced Refrigeration podcast. If you guys don't already follow them, definitely do. There's lots of knowledge to be had there. I love what they talk about. I'd love to learn more about it, but it doesn't make sense for me to tailor my business and take it in that direction. I just kind of stay in my lane and do what we do best. So different task each day. Yeah, that's right. How did we get started in the corporate restaurant side of things? Dylan, my dad started the company in the 1980s, and he was already working for someone else doing restaurant refrigeration and air conditioning. And then we have just survived via word of mouth. He started his company in the late 80s, and then I came to work for him officially in the early 2000s. And here we are now. We partnered and, run the company together. My dad's pretty much semi-retired at this point, and it's great. All right. Well, let's see. Christopher says he designs refrigeration racks and condensing units for a living. Wish he would have been in the field first and then learn the hands-on. And I agree. That is a huge, huge step. And I wish that we had requirements for designers and engineers to have to do field work before they went into the design side, and vice versa. I mean, service technicians need to understand it's really easy for us to criticize the installers, the designers, because of something that's difficult to work on. There's a lot of factors that go into things, and we all need to understand each other's sides of things, right? We tend to pick on engineers because, it's the engineer's fault. They spec'd this, and, but what you don't know is the engineer spec'd this, but then the general that was running the job let the plumbers come in first and run their plumbing. So then that made it difficult to run the ductwork or the piping for the refrigeration, or the flip side. The refrigeration guy came in and ran the piping, and then the plumber couldn't run his stuff. I mean, it really needs to all work together, and builders and general contractors really need to understand what the trades are doing on their job sites, and they need to all work together, and they need to communicate, and they need to understand that sometimes something takes precedent, that kind of stuff. So, all right. Well, my voice is about had it for this stream. I really appreciate you guys. I'm going to cue up the outro music, and we will definitely catch you on the next one. Thank you so very much. You shouldn't be here anymore. My dogs want to know why you're here too, because they're trapped in my office and they want to leave. They're making weird noises, but like, you need to go because I don't have much voice to do this. I'm already going to be gone. My tea's only going so far here. Probably should have put some honey in it. That probably would have helped my voice a little bit, but you know, I do have to say thank you so very much. Like, you know, even though like these are work for me to do these live streams, and it is work for me to come up with all like this 2 pages of stuff that I have to talk about. And, you know, Bill's been helping me with that. Bill Russell, Curious HVAC guy, has been helping me behind the scenes, do a lot of stuff. So thank you to Bill. Thank you to all the other moderators. Thank you to everybody that just shows up and just listens to me ramble. Even though this is work for me, like I do get something out of this too. Like it's kind of an outlet. I appreciate it. It can be frustrating at times, but it's still, I appreciate all the feedback. I appreciate everybody that watches the videos and interacts. You know, it is awesome to see that people, you know, gain something from, you know, the little bit of knowledge that I have. And again, I totally understand, like, I'm not the best service technician. I'm not perfect. I'm not at all. But, you know, I just try my best. So thank you so very much. And I'm going to go ahead and hit end on this. We will catch you guys on the next one.